I've always been intrigued by horror stories and urban legends, so when I first heard about the silent room on the dark web, I couldn't resist the temptation. It was rumored to be a live stream where participants experienced absolute terror in a soundproof room with negative decibels, driving them to madness. No screams, no cries for help, just eerie, unsettling silence. One night, I decided to find this silent room. After hours of navigating through various links and dead ends, I finally stumbled upon a site with a simple black screen and a single prompt. Enter. I hesitated, but eventually clicked, and the screen went dark. When the stream began, it showed a small, padded room. The walls were lined with soundproof material, designed to absorb all sound and create an environment of negative decibels. In the center of the room was a single chair. A man was seated, his eyes wide with terror. He was gagged, and his hands and feet were bound. The chat box was filled with viewers placing bets on how long he would last. I felt a pang of guilt, but couldn't look away. The man was speaking, but not in English. It sounded like Russian, and the chat translated it for those watching. "Please, I didn't do anything. Let me go," he pleaded. The text on the screen labeled him as a criminal who deserved this punishment, adding a twisted sense of justice to the horror. Minutes passed and the man's fear became palpable. The silence in the room was unnerving. Every rustle, every gasp was amplified, making the atmosphere even more oppressive. The camera zoomed in on his face, capturing every flicker of panic. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the man began to scream, but no sound escaped his gagged mouth. As the session continued, the man's behavior grew more erratic. He started clawing at the walls, banging his head against the padding, his screams swallowed by the soundproofing. The viewers in the chat egged him on, their comments growing increasingly sadistic. "Break him," one typed. "Make him suffer," another added. The camera caught every moment of his descent into madness. He began to tear at his skin, scratching himself raw. His eyes darted around the room, seeing things that weren't there. The silence was maddening, each second stretched into an eternity. It was clear that the lack of sound was driving him insane. As I watched, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. The more I observed, the more I realized that this man wasn't a criminal. His pleas were desperate, his terror too genuine. He kept repeating, "I just want to go home," over and over again. The chat's translations turned darker, revealing that he claimed to have been kidnapped. The horrifying realization hit me like a punch to the gut. These weren't criminals. They were ordinary people, abducted and thrown into this nightmare for the twisted entertainment of dark web viewers. I felt sick, my hands trembling as I watched the man's mind unravel. I wanted to leave, to shut off my computer and pretend I hadn't seen any of it. But I was paralyzed with fear and morbid curiosity. Then, the screen went black, and a message appeared. "Next session begins in 10 minutes. Stay tuned." I closed the browser and sat in the dark. The man's terrified face burned into my memory. I tried to shake off the unease, but it clung to me like a shadow. The thought of those people, trapped in that silent hell, haunted me. I knew I couldn't just let this go. For the next few days, I couldn't focus on anything. I was constantly checking over my shoulder, feeling like I was being watched. Then one night, I received a message from an unknown number. "We know you were watching. Enjoy the show?" My blood ran cold. They had found me. A few days later, a package arrived at my door with no return address. Inside was a USB drive. My heart pounded as I plugged it into my laptop. There was a single video file. When I played it, my blood ran cold. It was a recording of the silent room, but this time it was empty. The camera zoomed in on the chair, and a message appeared on the screen. "We're waiting for you." Panic set in. I knew I had to get out of there. I packed my bags and left town, hoping to start anew where no one knew me. But the damage was done. My past haunted me, and I struggled to find peace. The once promising life I had built was shattered, and I was left with nothing but regret. I often think back to that night, wishing I had never found that site. The dark web is a dangerous place, filled with horrors that can reach out and destroy your life. If you're reading this, take my advice. Stay away from the dark web. Some things are better left unseen.
I've always been a bit of a thrill seeker, especially when it comes to exploring the darker corners of the internet. One night, out of sheer boredom, I decided to venture onto the dark web. I'd heard all the horror stories, but curiosity got the better of me. After navigating through various forums and marketplaces, I stumbled upon a hidden link that promised to show exclusive content. Against my better judgment, I clicked the link. The page that loaded was simple. Just a black screen with a video player and a chat box. The title of the video was in Spanish, but I managed to translate it to something like, "The Real Nightmare." Feeling a mix of excitement and dread, I hit play. The video started with shaky footage of a dimly lit basement. The walls were made of concrete, and there were dark stains everywhere. As the camera panned around, it focused on a man tied to a chair in the middle of the room. He looked terrified, his eyes wide with panic. The chat box was filled with comments in various languages, most of them urging for the show to start. The man in the video was speaking Spanish, and although I couldn't understand everything, his desperation was clear. He was pleading for his life. Suddenly, a masked figure entered the frame, carrying a large knife. The chat erupted with excitement. I wanted to look away, but I was paralyzed by horror. The masked figure started to torture the man, and his screams were the most gut-wrenching sound I've ever heard. The video didn't stop there. The masked figure toyed with his victim, using various tools to inflict unimaginable pain. The man's cries echoed in the basement, growing weaker with each passing minute. I could see the life draining from his eyes, replaced by a hollow, vacant stare. The viewers in the chat were thrilled, their comments becoming more sadistic and deranged. As the torture continued, the masked figure began speaking to the camera in broken English, describing the man's supposed crimes. They painted him as a monster, deserving of this brutal punishment. But something felt off. The man's pleas for mercy, his insistence that he was innocent, seemed too genuine. I started to suspect that he wasn't the criminal they claimed he was. He was just a regular person, caught in a nightmare he couldn't escape. The video ended abruptly, and the screen went black. I sat there in stunned silence, my heart racing. It was then that I noticed a new message in the chat box directed at me. "Enjoy the show." My blood ran cold. How did they know I was watching? The next few days were a blur of paranoia. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I started receiving strange emails from unknown addresses, each one containing screenshots from the video, and messages like, "You're next." I tried to ignore them, hoping it was just a cruel prank. But then, things escalated. I came home one night to find my apartment door slightly ajar. Inside, my computer was turned on, displaying the same dark website. A message on the screen read, "We're closer than you think." Panic set in. I called the police, but without any concrete evidence, there was little they could do. I decided to stay with a friend for a few days. But even there, the sense of being watched didn't leave me. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications from unknown numbers. They sent pictures of me walking on the street, entering my friend's apartment, and even sleeping. It was clear they were watching my every move. Terrified, I packed my things and left town, hoping to start fresh somewhere far away. But the fear never left me. The messages became more personal, more invasive. They knew things about my past, my family, my deepest secrets. They sent doctored photos of me committing heinous acts, threatening to release them if I didn't comply with their demands. One night I woke up to find a note slipped under my door. It simply read, "You can't hide." My heart pounded as I realized the gravity of my situation. No matter where I went, they would find me. I was trapped in a web of terror with no escape. Desperate, I decided to confront them. I logged back onto the dark web and accessed the site again. This time, I left a message in the chat begging for them to stop. Almost instantly, I received a reply. Meet us at the coordinates we send, or everyone you love will suffer. I knew it was a trap, but I had no choice. I couldn't let them hurt my family. They sent the coordinates, which led to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. I arrived at midnight, my heart in my throat. The building was dark and foreboding, every shadow a potential threat. As I stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind me. The room was empty, except for a single chair in the center, illuminated by a flickering light. I could hear whispers all around me, but I couldn't see anyone. My fear reached its peak when the light went out, plunging me into darkness. Suddenly, a spotlight turned on, blinding me. I shielded my eyes, trying to make out the figures standing around me. They were wearing masks, just like in the video. One of them stepped forward and handed me a phone. On the screen was a live feed of my family, tied up and gagged. "Do as we say and they live," the figure said in a distorted voice. "Resist and they die." I was forced to participate in their sick games, recording videos of myself committing increasingly degrading and violent acts. Each video was uploaded to the dark web where the viewers watched with glee. My life became a living hell, every moment filled with fear and shame. The worst part was the realization that there was no escape. They had total control over me, and there was nothing I could do. The police couldn't help, and my attempts to contact cybersecurity experts led to dead ends. I was utterly alone, trapped in a nightmare with no end in sight. Months passed, and I became a shell of my former self. I barely ate, barely slept, constantly haunted by the knowledge that at any moment they could end my life or the lives of my loved ones. The videos continued, each one more depraved than the last, until I could barely recognize myself. Then one day, it all stopped. The messages ceased, the demands ended, and the live feed of my family disappeared. I was left in a state of shock, unable to comprehend what had happened. Had they grown bored of their game, or were they simply waiting for the right moment to strike again?
I uncovered a dark web organ trade site and became a victim. I've always had a fascination with the dark web. What started as a curiosity turned into a dangerous obsession. Late one night, while exploring the hidden corners of the internet, I stumbled upon a forum discussing the dark web's black market. Among the usual illegal items, one thread stood out: exclusive organ trade. I clicked on the thread and was taken to a site with a list of available organs, complete with prices and delivery options. It was sickening to think that human lives were being reduced to commodities, but I couldn't look away. As I scrolled through the listings, I noticed a chat box in the corner of the screen. People were discussing recent acquisitions and sharing tips on how to avoid detection. Creating a fake account, I joined the conversation. I asked a few innocent questions, and before long, I received a private message from someone named the Surgeon. He offered to show me the real operations, the ones not listed on the public site. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The Surgeon sent me a link to a live stream. The screen was dark at first, but soon a dimly lit room came into view. There was an operating table in the center, with a person strapped to it, unconscious. The surgeon appeared, wearing a surgical mask and gloves. He began explaining the process, his voice cold and detached. I watched in horror as he started the operation, removing the person's organs with precision. The chat was filled with comments from viewers, placing bids on the organs and discussing the quality of the merchandise. It was too much to bear. I closed the browser and tried to forget what I had seen, but the images haunted me. I knew I couldn't stay silent, so I contacted the authorities, providing them with all the information I had gathered. They promised to investigate, but I never heard back. I thought it was over, but I was wrong. A few days later, strange things started happening. My Xbox account was hacked, and my friends received bizarre and offensive messages from my profile. Next, my Instagram account was compromised, and my followers were bombarded with doctored photos of me in compromising situations. The final straw was when my LinkedIn account was hacked. Colleagues and potential employers received emails with the same doctored photos and accusations of illegal activities. My life spiraled out of control. I lost my job due to the false allegations, and my reputation was ruined. Friends and family received these photos and messages, and soon no one wanted to associate with me. I was ostracized, a pariah in my own community. The messages were vile, filled with graphic threats and insults. Photoshopped images of me in illegal activities circulated widely. Friends and family blocked me, convinced I was a monster. My boss called me into his office, showing me an email with the doctored photos and demanding an explanation. There was nothing I could say to convince him it wasn't me. My coworkers avoided me, whispering behind my back. My social media accounts were flooded with hate messages. Even people I didn't know seemed to relish in my downfall. I started receiving physical mail at my home, letters filled with threats, graphic images, and even dead animals. It felt like the whole world was against me. Desperate to escape the nightmare, I moved to Los Angeles, hoping to start anew where no one knew me. But the damage was done. My past haunted me, and I struggled to find work. The once promising career I had built was shattered, and I was left with nothing but regret. I often think back to that night, wishing I had never found that site or reported it. The dark web is a dangerous place, filled with horrors that can reach out and destroy your life. If you're reading this, take my advice. Stay away from the dark web. Some things are better left unseen. One day, I received a package at my new apartment. There was no return address. Inside was a USB drive. My heart pounded as I plugged it into my laptop. There was a single video file. When I played it, my blood ran cold. It was a recording of the live stream I had watched, but this time, it ended with a message. "We know where you are." The fear never left me. I've since moved again, constantly staying on the move, never settling in one place for too long. The relentless guilt of what I had unleashed upon myself have left me a shadow of my former self. I've cut all ties with my past, living in anonymity, but the dark web's shadow looms large over my life.